The blood on the snow was the first thing Rachel saw when she opened her eyes, bright crimson against white powder that had already begun to bury her where she lay. She tried to move, but pain screamed through her ribs, her back, her face swollen so badly that one eye would not open all the way. The snowstorm howled around her like a living thing, and somewhere in the darkness behind her was the cabin where her father had finally gone too far. 20 years of his fists, 20 years of his rage fueled by whiskey and bitterness. And tonight, when she had tried to stop him from selling her to Clayton Morrison, a man 3 times her age with a reputation for cruelty, he had beaten her worse than ever before and thrown her out into the December blizzard to die. The year was 1882, and Taylor, Texas was not supposed to see snow like this. But the storm had rolled down from the north with unusual fury, blanketing everything in white and bringing temperatures that killed cattle and froze water troughs solid. Rachel Norton tried to pull herself forward through the drifts, her thin cotton dress soaked through and clinging to her skin, her bare feet already numb beyond feeling. She had made it perhaps 50 yards from the cabin before her strength gave out completely. Now she lay there watching her own blood drip onto the snow, thinking that this was how her story would end, frozen and alone with no one to mourn her except perhaps her mother's memory, dead these 5 years past. She did not hear the horse approaching through the storm until it was nearly upon her. The animal snorted and shied, and a man's voice called out sharp and urgent. Strong hands rolled her over gently, and through her one good eye Rachel saw a face above her, young and weathered by sun and wind, with gray eyes that widened in shock at the sight of her injuries. "Christ Almighty," the man breathed. "What happened to you?" Rachel tried to speak, but her split lip made the words come out garbled. The man did not wait for an answer. He stripped off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her, then lifted her as carefully as if she were made of glass. She felt herself being settled onto a horse, felt the man swing up behind her and cradle her against his chest as he urged the animal forward through the storm. "Stay with me now," he said, his voice close to her ear. "My ranch is just over the next rise. You are going to be all right." Rachel wanted to believe him, but darkness was pulling at her, warm and inviting compared to the cold. She let herself sink into it, aware only of the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the strong arms holding her secure. She woke to warmth and the smell of wood smoke. Pain still throbbed through every part of her body, but it was distant now, muted. She was lying on something soft, covered with heavy quilts, and when she managed to open her eyes she saw rough wooden walls, a stone fireplace with flames dancing behind an iron grate, and windows showing only white beyond the glass where the storm still raged. "You are awake." The voice came from her left, and Rachel turned her head carefully to see the man from the storm sitting in a chair beside the bed. In the firelight, she could see him more clearly now. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and those striking gray eyes that watched her with concern. His face was handsome in a rough way, with a strong jaw and a nose that had been broken at least once. He wore a simple cotton shirt and denim pants, and there was a gentleness in his expression that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance. "Where am I?" Rachel managed to ask, though her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. "My ranch, about 3 miles south of Taylor." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "My name is Ryan Fitzgerald. I found you in the snow. Who did this to you?" Rachel closed her eyes. Shame washed over her, hot and bitter. "My father." She heard Ryan draw in a sharp breath. When she opened her eyes again, his jaw was tight with anger, but his voice remained gentle. "Why? I refused to let him sell me." The words came easier now, perhaps because this stranger's kindness had loosened something inside her that had been locked tight for years. Clayton Morrison offered him $200 and a case of whiskey if I would marry him. I said no. My father said I did not have a choice. When I tried to run, She touched her swollen face gingerly. He did this and threw me out into the storm. Ryan was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists on his knees. When he finally spoke, his voice was hard as iron. He will never touch you again. You have my word on that. Rachel stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You do not understand. My father is Joshua Norton. He owns the biggest cattle operation in this part of Texas. He has men who work for him, who would do anything he asked. I do not care if he is the governor himself, Ryan said flatly. No man has the right to do what he did to you. You are safe here, and you are staying here until you are healed. After that, if you want to leave, I will help you get wherever you want to go. But I swear to you, Miss Norton, he will never lay another hand on you. Tears burned in Rachel's eyes, the first she had let herself shed in years. She had learned long ago that crying only made her father angrier, so she had taught herself to hold everything inside, to show no weakness, to endure. But this stranger's fierce protection, offered so freely to someone he did not even know, broke something loose inside her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Ryan's expression softened. "You do not need to thank me. Any decent man would do the same." He stood and moved to the fireplace, ladling something from a pot that hung over the flames. "You need to eat. It is just venison stew, but it is hot, and it will help you get your strength back." Over the next 3 days, the storm continued to rage outside while Rachel slowly began to heal in the warmth of Ryan's ranch house. He tended to her injuries with a gentleness that surprised her, cleaning the cuts on her face with careful precision, and wrapping her bruised ribs with strips of cloth torn from an old sheet. He fed her soup and stew, built up the fire whenever it began to die down, and slept in a chair by the door rather than in his own bed, which he had given over to her without question. Rachel learned that Ryan had come to Texas 2 years ago from Montana, where his family had raised horses on a small spread near Helena. His parents and younger sister had died in a fire that swept through their barn one dry summer, and Ryan had sold everything and headed south, looking for a fresh start away from the memories. He had bought this land with the money from the sale, 200 acres of decent grazing and a creek that ran year-round, and he was slowly building up a herd of cattle and breaking horses to sell to the army and to ranchers who needed good working stock. "It is not much yet," he said on the 3rd evening as they sat together near the fire, Rachel wrapped in quilts in the chair he usually occupied while he sat on the floor with his back against the wall. "But it is mine, and no one can take it from me. That matters more than having something grand." Rachel understood that sentiment completely. "I have never had anything that was truly mine," she said softly. "Everything I ever owned, my father gave me, and he never let me forget it. He would take things away as punishment, burn my books, or give my clothes to the cook's daughter. I learned not to care too much about anything." Ryan looked at her with those steady gray eyes. "That is no way to live." "No," Rachel agreed, "it is not. But when you have no choice, you do what you must to survive." "You have a choice now," Ryan said. "When you are well enough, I meant what I said. I will help you go wherever you want, or you could stay here and work for me. I could use help with the horses, and I am a fair employer. I would pay you wages, and you would have your own room, your own space. No one would own you." The offer took Rachel's breath away. The thought of staying here, of having work and wages and freedom, was almost too good to believe, but doubt crept in quickly. "My father will come looking for me once the storm breaks." "Let him come," Ryan said grimly. He will find out I am not a man who backs down easily. On the fourth day, the storm finally ended. Rachel woke to brilliant sunshine streaming through the windows and a silence that seemed almost shocking after days of howling wind. She was moving better now, her ribs still sore but no longer sending sharp pains through her chest with every breath. Her face was healing too, the swelling reduced enough that she could see properly out of both eyes, though the bruises had turned spectacular shades of purple and green. Ryan was outside when she made her way to the window, and she watched him working in the snow, clearing a path to the barn where he kept his horses. He moved with efficient grace, his breath making clouds in the cold air, and Rachel felt something stir in her chest that had nothing to do with her injuries. This man had saved her life and asked nothing in return. He had treated her with more kindness in 4 days than her father had shown her in 20 years. And when he came back inside, stamping snow from his boots and grinning at the sight of her standing on her own, she felt that unfamiliar warmth grow stronger. "The world looks different in sunshine," he said, hanging his coat on a peg by the door. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Rachel said honestly. "Strong enough to be useful, I think. If your offer still stands, I would like to stay and work for you. At least for a while, until I figure out what else I might do." Ryan's smile was worth every moment of pain she had endured. "The offer stands, and I am glad you are staying. I was not looking forward to managing this place entirely on my own for another season." They spent that day and the next getting Rachel settled into what had been a storage room off the main living area. Ryan cleared it out and brought in a narrow bed frame from the barn, a mattress that had belonged to his sister, and a small dresser he said had been his mother's. Rachel protested that he was giving her too much, but he waved off her concerns. "They are just things," he said, "and they should be used, not gathering dust. Besides, you are going to earn your keep. I have 6 horses that need breaking, and spring foaling season is coming up fast. You will have plenty to do." Rachel discovered over the following weeks that she loved working with the horses. She had always had a way with animals, a patience and intuition that made them trust her, and Ryan recognized it immediately. He taught her how to gentle a green-broke colt, how to read a horse's body language and respond accordingly, how to work with the animal's nature rather than against it. They spent long hours in the round pen he had built near the barn, and Rachel found herself laughing more than she had in years as some stubborn yearling tried to outsmart her, or a mare with attitude decided she had had enough training for one day. Ryan was an excellent teacher, patient and encouraging, quick to praise when she did something well and gentle in his corrections when she made mistakes. More than that, he was easy to be around, with a quiet sense of humor that caught Rachel off guard and made her smile when she least expected it. He told stories about his time in Montana, about his family and the trouble he and his sister had gotten into as children, and Rachel found herself sharing her own stories in return. Though hers were darker and tinged with pain, she was only beginning to process. "My mother was the only light in that house," she told him one evening as they sat together after supper, a habit they had fallen into without discussion. "She tried to protect me from my father as much as she could, but he was careful never to leave marks where anyone could see them when she was alive. After she died from pneumonia, he stopped caring about that. I think he blamed me for her death somehow, even though there was nothing I could have done." Ryan reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "You are not to blame for his cruelty. That is his burden to carry, not yours." Rachel looked down at their joined hands, at the way hers fit so naturally in his, and felt that warmth in her chest spread through her entire body. She was falling in love with Ryan Fitzgerald. she realized with a start. It should have frightened her, but instead it felt right, like something that had been waiting to happen since the moment he pulled her from the snow. Spring came early that year, melting the last of the snow and turning the prairie green with new grass. Rachel's injuries healed completely, leaving only a small scar above her left eyebrow that Ryan said made her look like a warrior. She had gained weight, her frame filling out with good food and regular work, and color had returned to her cheeks. She felt stronger than she ever had, both in body and in spirit, and she knew it was because of this place and the man who had given her a chance at a new life. Joshua Norton finally came in late March, riding up the lane to Ryan's ranch house with two of his hired men flanking him. Rachel was in the barn grooming one of the mares when she heard the horses approaching, and her blood went cold. She recognized the sound of her father's big bay gelding, the particular cadence of its gait, and fear flooded through her like ice water. Ryan was in the house working on his account books. Rachel ran to get him, bursting through the door with her heart pounding. "My father is here." Ryan looked up sharply, then stood and reached for the gun belt hanging on a peg near the door. He strapped it on with quick efficiency, then turned to Rachel. "Stay inside. No matter what happens, you stay inside. Understand?" Rachel wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. She nodded mutely and watched as he stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him but leaving it unlatched so she could hear. "That is far enough," Ryan called out, his voice carrying clearly. "State your business and then get off my land." "I am here for my daughter." Joshua Norton's voice was exactly as Rachel remembered it, rough and mean with an undercurrent of violence that never fully disappeared. "I know she is here. Give her to me and there will be no trouble." "Your daughter is a grown woman and she chooses to stay here of her own free will," Ryan said evenly. "I suggest you turn around and ride back where you came from." "You have no right to keep her from me," Joshua snarled. "She is my blood, my property, and I want her back." "She is not your property." Ryan's voice went hard as granite. "She is a human being and you have no claim on her, not after what you did." Rachel peered through the gap in the door and saw her father's face go red with rage. "Who the hell do you think you are, boy? I will have you arrested for kidnapping. I will burn this place to the ground." "You will do nothing of the sort," Ryan said, and his hand moved to rest on the butt of his pistol, not drawing but making the threat clear. "Because if you try, I will make sure everyone in Taylor and beyond knows exactly what kind of man you are. How you beat your daughter bloody and threw her out into a blizzard to die. How you tried to sell her like livestock to Clayton Morrison. Do you think your reputation will survive that? Do you think your business partners will want to associate with a man who murders his own child?" The silence that followed was thick and dangerous. Rachel held her breath, her hands clenched into fists. She saw her father's hired men shift nervously in their saddles, their eyes flicking between Joshua and Ryan. "You are making a mistake," Joshua finally said, his voice low and venomous. "A mistake you will regret." "The only mistake I would regret is letting you take her," Ryan said. "Now get off my land. If you come back, I will not be so polite." For a long moment, Rachel thought her father would charge forward, that violence would erupt and blood would spill on the spring grass. But then Joshua jerked his horse's reins viciously and wheeled around. "This is not over," he spat. "Yes," Ryan said quietly. "It is." Rachel watched through the window as her father and his men rode away, and only when they had disappeared over the rise did she let herself breathe again. Ryan came back inside, his jaw still tight with anger, and found her standing in the middle of the room with tears streaming down her face. "Hey," he said softly, reaching for her. "Hey, it is all right. He is gone. You could have been killed," Rachel choked out. He could have shot you and it would have been my fault. It would have been his fault, not yours, Ryan corrected gently. He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her and holding her while she shook. And I meant every word I said to him. He will never touch you again. I will make sure of it. Rachel pressed her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and horses and wood smoke. Why? She whispered. Why are you doing all this for me? You do not owe me anything. Ryan pulled back just enough to look down at her, one hand coming up to cup her face with infinite tenderness. Because I love you, he said simply. I think I have loved you since I found you in the snow, so fierce and determined to survive. You are the strongest, bravest person I have ever met, Rachel Norton, and I would do anything to keep you safe. Rachel's heart felt like it might burst. I love you too, she said, the words coming easily because they were true, truer than anything she had ever said. I did not think I could ever trust anyone enough to love them, but you changed that. You changed everything. Ryan smiled, that rare, beautiful smile that transformed his whole face, and then he was kissing her with a gentleness that made her ache. Rachel kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into it, all the gratitude and hope and fierce love that had been building inside her for months. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ryan rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said. Not because you need my protection or because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to, because you love me the way I love you. Marry me and help me build something good here, something that is ours together. Yes, Rachel breathed. Yes, 1,000 times yes. They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Taylor, with the preacher's wife and the general store owner standing as witnesses. Rachel wore a simple blue dress that Ryan had bought for her in town, and he wore his best shirt with his dark hair freshly cut. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Ryan kissed her in front of God and everyone, and Rachel felt like she had finally come home. Joshua Norton tried once more to cause trouble, spreading rumors around town that Ryan had stolen his daughter and forced her into marriage. But Rachel stood up in the general store one busy Saturday morning and told everyone exactly what her father had done, lifting her hair to show the scar above her eyebrow and describing in clear, steady tones how he had beaten her and thrown her into the storm to die. The women of Taylor rallied around her with fierce protectiveness, and the men, many of whom had done business with Joshua Norton, looked at him with new suspicion and disgust. Within 6 months, Joshua's cattle operation was failing, his reputation in tatters, and he sold out and moved north to Oklahoma. Rachel heard the news from the general store owner's wife and felt nothing but relief. Life on the ranch settled into a rhythm that Rachel cherished. She and Ryan worked side by side every day, breaking horses and tending cattle, making repairs to fences and buildings, planning for the future. At night, they lay in bed together in the room that had been his and was now theirs, talking about their dreams and making love with a passion that never seemed to dim. Ryan was tender and considerate, always making sure Rachel felt safe and cherished, and she learned to trust him completely with both her body and her heart. Their first child came in the spring of 1884, a sturdy boy with Ryan's gray eyes and Rachel's dark hair. They named him James, after Ryan's father, and Rachel discovered a capacity for love she had not known she possessed. Watching Ryan with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he showed the baby, made her love him even more deeply. He was everything her own father had not been, and she knew their children would grow up surrounded by love and security. The ranch prospered over the years. Ryan's reputation as a horse breaker spread, and they began getting orders from as far away as San Antonio and Houston. Rachel proved to have a good head for business, managing their accounts and negotiating sales with a shrewdness that impressed even the most hardened cattle buyers. They hired on a couple of hands to help with the work, good men who treated Rachel with respect and loyalty. Their second child arrived 2 years later, a daughter they named Grace. She was small and fierce from the moment she was born, and Ryan doted on her shamelessly, watching him teach her to ride when she was barely old enough to walk, seeing the pride in his eyes when she showed aptitude with the horses, filled Rachel with a contentment she had never imagined possible. The years passed in a blur of hard work and simple joys. James grew tall and strong, with his father's quiet competence and his mother's determination. Grace became a skilled rider, fearless and bold, with a laugh that could light up the darkest day. A third child came when Rachel was 30, another boy they named Thomas, who was gentle-natured and loved working in the garden Rachel had planted behind the house. On their 10th anniversary, Ryan took Rachel into town and bought her a locket at the jeweler's shop, a delicate gold piece with their initials engraved on the front. Inside, he had placed tiny photographs of their 3 children. "So you can carry them with you always," he said as he fastened it around her neck. "And so you remember that you are loved beyond measure." Rachel touched the locket, tears pricking her eyes. "How could I ever forget? You have given me everything, Ryan. A home, a family, a life I never dreamed I could have. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Ryan corrected softly. "I was just surviving before you came along, going through the motions. You taught me how to truly live again, how to hope and dream and love. I am the one who should be grateful." They stood together on the porch that evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, their children playing in the yard before them. James was teaching Thomas how to throw a rope, while Grace raced around on her pony, whooping with joy. The ranch stretched out around them, 200 acres of land they had built into something prosperous and good through years of hard work and dedication. "Do you ever think about that night in the storm?" Ryan asked quietly, his arm around Rachel's waist, holding her close. "Sometimes," Rachel admitted, "but not the way you might think. I think about how it led me here to this life with you. I think about how close I came to dying and how grateful I am that you found me. Everything good in my life started that night, Ryan. Everything." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I was riding home from Taylor, annoyed about being caught in the storm, thinking about nothing but getting warm and dry. And then I saw you lying there in the snow, and my whole world changed. Some people might call it fate or providence. I just know I thank God every day that I took that road, at that moment, in that storm." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Rachel leaned into her husband's embrace and felt completely at peace. The girl who had been beaten and thrown into a blizzard to die was gone, replaced by a woman who knew her own strength and worth. She had a husband who loved her with his whole heart, children who filled her days with laughter and purpose, and a home that was truly hers in every way that mattered. The sound of hoofbeats made them both look up, and they saw a rider approaching in the twilight. James and Thomas ran to open the gate while Grace rode alongside the visitor, chattering away in her friendly manner. As the rider came closer, Rachel recognized him as the circuit judge who passed through Taylor 4 times a year. "Evening, Fitzgerald," the judge called out as he dismounted. "Sorry to drop by unannounced, but I have some news I thought you would want to hear in person." "What news is that?" Ryan asked, his arm tightening slightly around Rachel. "Joshua Norton died last week in Oklahoma. Pneumonia, from what I heard. He never remarried, had no other children. His property went to settle his debts, which were considerable." The judge looked at Rachel with kind eyes. "I thought you should know, Mrs. Fitzgerald. You are the only family he had left, and you are listed in his will." Rachel felt Ryan's arm supporting her, steady and strong. She took a breath and found that she felt nothing much at all, not grief or satisfaction or relief. Just a distant sadness for what might have been if her father had been a different kind of man. What does the will say? That he leaves you nothing but his regrets and asks your forgiveness. The judge pulled out a folded piece of paper. "His lawyer gave me this to deliver to you." It is a letter, written in his own hand. Rachel took the letter but did not open it. "Thank you for bringing it. Would you like to stay for supper? We have plenty." The judge accepted gratefully, and Rachel went inside to help prepare the meal while Ryan showed him around the ranch. Later, after they had eaten and the judge had ridden on toward his next stop, Rachel sat by the fire with the letter in her hands. Ryan sat beside her, patient and quiet, letting her decide what to do. Finally, she opened it. The handwriting was shaky, as if written by a sick or elderly man. The words were simple and direct. "Rachel, I know I have no right to ask anything of you after what I did. I was a cruel man, made worse by drink and bitterness, and you suffered for my sins. Your mother would have been ashamed of me. I am ashamed of myself. I heard that you married and have a family, that you are happy. That is more than I deserve to know, but I am glad of it. You were always stronger than me, braver than me. I hope you can forgive me someday, though I do not expect it. I hope your life is everything mine was not. Your father, Joshua Norton." Rachel read it twice, then folded it carefully and set it aside. "He waited until he was dying to say any of this," she said quietly. "When it was safe, when he knew he would not have to face me or change anything about himself." "Does it matter now?" Ryan asked gently. Rachel thought about it, really thought. "No," she said finally. "It does not. I forgave him a long time ago, not because he deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger. Carrying that around would have poisoned everything good in my life, and I refused to let him take anything more from me. But I do not need to read his words or accept his deathbed apology to move on. I already moved on, years ago, the day I chose to stay here and build a life with you." Ryan took her hand, lacing their fingers together. "I am proud of you. I do not know if I could be that strong." "You are the one who made it possible," Rachel said, squeezing his hand. "You showed me what love and respect looked like. You gave me a safe place to heal and grow. Everything I am now, everything good in my life, exists because you found me in that storm and refused to let me go." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. After a while, Rachel stood and carried the letter to the flames, dropping it in and watching it catch and curl, the words disappearing into ash and smoke. It felt like closing a door on the past, finally and completely. The years continued to unfold in a pattern of work and love and family. James grew into a fine young man who took over much of the horse training from his father, showing the same patience and skill Ryan had demonstrated. Grace married a neighboring rancher's son when she was 20, a good man who loved her fierce independence and made her laugh. Thomas discovered a talent for wood carving and began making beautiful saddles and tack that sold for impressive prices in the larger towns. Rachel and Ryan grew older together, their hair graying but their love for each other only deepening with time. They became grandparents when James married and had children of his own, and Rachel discovered the joy of holding her son's baby and seeing Ryan's eyes looking back at her from another generation. On the 20th anniversary of the night Ryan had found Rachel in the storm, they rode out together to the spot where it had happened. Someone had built a fence nearby in the intervening years, and a small grove of trees had grown up. But Rachel knew the place by the way it sat in the landscape, the rise of the hill behind it, and the view toward what had been her father's ranch. "I should have died here," she said quietly, standing in the grass with Ryan beside her. "By all rights, I should have frozen to death in that storm." "But you did not," Ryan said, pulling her close. "You survived because you are strong, and because fate or luck or God decided we needed to find each other. And look at everything that came from that terrible night. Our children, our grandchildren, this life we built together. Beauty from ashes, love from pain." Rachel looked up at him, at the face she knew as well as her own, lined now with age and experience but still as dear to her as it had been the day she opened her eyes and saw him bending over her in the snow. "I would go through it all again," she said fiercely. "Every moment of suffering, every year of fear and pain if it meant ending up here with you." Ryan kissed her then, soft and sweet, a promise renewed. "You never have to go through anything alone again. I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for 20 more and beyond that if the good Lord grants us the time. You are my heart, Rachel Fitzgerald. You always will be." They rode back to the ranch as the sun set. Two figures on horseback moving across the Texas prairie, partners in every sense of the word. Behind them, the place where Rachel had nearly died was just another patch of grass and earth, rendered powerless by time, and the life that had grown from that frozen night. The ranch house came into view, solid and welcoming, smoke rising from the chimney. Inside, their children and grandchildren were gathering for supper, their voices and laughter carrying on the evening air. This was home, built from hard work and determination, and a love that had started with a desperate rescue in a snowstorm and grown into something unbreakable. Rachel dismounted in the barn and began unsaddling her horse, working alongside Ryan with the ease of long practice. He smiled at her over his horse's back, that special smile he reserved just for her, and she smiled back, her heart full to bursting with gratitude and joy. She had survived her father's brutality. She had been rescued by a cowboy with gray eyes and a gentle heart. She had built a life beyond her wildest dreams, filled with love and purpose and family. And though the scars of her past would always be a part of her, they no longer defined her. She was Rachel Fitzgerald, wife and mother and grandmother, rancher and horsewoman, a woman who had been given a second chance and had seized it with both hands. As they walked from the barn to the house together, Ryan's arm around her shoulders and hers around his waist, Rachel looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky and sent up a silent prayer of thanksgiving. For being found in the storm, for surviving, for the courage to stay and fight for happiness, and most of all for the man beside her who had kept his promise from that very first night. He had said her father would never touch her again, and he had meant it. But he had given her so much more than protection. He had given her love, partnership, respect, and a family that cherished her. He had given her a life worth living, and she had given him the same in return. Inside the house, their youngest grandchild, barely 2 years old, came toddling to meet them, arms outstretched and face bright with joy. Ryan scooped him up and the baby laughed, grabbing at his grandfather's face with chubby hands. Rachel watched them together, this man who had saved her life and the child who represented the future they had created, and knew with absolute certainty that everything had happened exactly as it was meant to. The darkness of that winter night 20 years ago had led to this moment, this house full of light and love and laughter. The man who had found her broken in the snow had kept every promise he had ever made. He had protected her, loved her, built a life with her that was everything she had never dared to hope for. And as they sat down to supper surrounded by family, Ryan at one end of the long table and Rachel at the other, their children and grandchildren filling the spaces between, Rachel caught her husband's eye and saw in his face the same deep contentment she felt in her own heart. They had started with nothing but each other and a determination to survive, and they had created something beautiful and lasting. The wild Texas wind blew outside, but inside there was only warmth and belonging. This was home, truly home, and Rachel Fitzgerald knew that she was exactly where she was always meant to be, beside the cowboy who had saved her life and taught her how to live again. Their love story had begun in violence and snow, but it had grown into something strong and enduring, a testament to the healing power of love and the strength of two people who refused to let their past define their future. And that, Rachel thought as she looked around the table at the faces of those she loved most in the world, was the best ending she could have ever imagined, and the best beginning to everything that would come after.